hall was already buzzing with excitement, filled with guests dressed in their finest clothes. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversations floated in the air. Amidst all the grandeur, there moved someone who seemed invisible to most people. She carried trays, straightened chairs, wiped down tables, and made sure that everything was perfect for the wedding day. Her uniform was simple, her shoes quiet, and her presence barely noticed by the crowd. Everyone thought of her as just a maid, part of the background that made the celebration possible but who had no part in the festivities themselves. She had been working at the estate for several years, and over time, she had learned to move through the halls without disturbing anyone, to clean without drawing attention, and to anticipate the needs of the guests before they even asked. She knew the exact spot to place a wine glass so it wouldn't be bumped, the perfect way to adjust a chair so it wouldn't squeak, and how to discreetly fix a crooked decoration. She had no desire to stand out. She liked the rhythm of her work, the small victories in making things perfect, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. But there was more to her than anyone realized. As she moved through the rooms, she often hummed little melodies to herself, simple tunes that no one paid attention to. She had learned to play the piano when she was very young, spending hours at the keyboard while her family barely noticed. Music had always been her secret friend, a place where she could express herself without words. It was her escape and her joy, something she kept hidden in a world that did not expect or value her talents. The day of the wedding was particularly busy. The staff hustled back and forth, making sure every detail was perfect. She moved gracefully among them, lifting trays and carrying baskets, but she always kept an ear open for the faint sound of music from the grand piano in the corner of the hall. Occasionally, she would find a moment to play a few notes, just to remind herself of the comfort it gave her. The other staff might see her fingers brushing the keys, but they never imagined she could truly play. Guests came and went, laughing and greeting one another. They paid her little attention, offering polite nods or brief smiles before moving on. Some of them assumed she was merely part of the staff, someone who worked in silence and would vanish when the night ended. They had no idea about the years she had spent practicing, the late nights alone at the piano, or the countless recitals in empty rooms where she could let her talent flourish without interruption. She noticed the bride from a distance, looking slightly nervous as she checked her dress and jewelry. The bride's hands trembled just a little as she adjusted her veil. The maid approached quietly, offering a calm smile and a word of encouragement, making sure everything was in its place. The bride barely noticed her, thanking her in passing and moving on. No one realized the depth of care in her gestures, the thoughtfulness behind each small action, or the quiet pride she took in making the day perfect. As the guests continued to arrive, the maid felt the familiar mix of excitement and anxiety in the air. She loved weddings for their beauty, the way people laughed, danced, and celebrated love. Yet she always experienced them from the edges, never fully a part of the joy around her. She moved through the room with careful steps, polishing silverware, straightening napkins, and making sure the flowers looked fresh. Every detail mattered to her, and she took her work seriously, even if others never noticed. In one quiet moment, she paused near the grand piano, brushing her fingers lightly across the keys. A soft note floated through the air, catching her ear and making her smile. She remembered the hours she had spent learning scales, the songs she had memorized, and the way her heart would race when she played something new. Music was her language, her voice when no one would listen. Here, in this busy wedding hall, she could feel that same excitement bubbling inside her, even though no one around her would guess it. The other staff were busy, bustling past her with trays and folded napkins. They barely gave her a second glance, assuming she was simply taking a moment's rest. No one imagined the depth of her talent, the years of dedication that had gone unseen, or the hidden dreams she carried. She had long learned to keep her abilities to herself, knowing that recognition was not given lightly and that people often underestimated those who appeared quiet and unassuming. The afternoon wore on, and the room transformed as the wedding approached. Flowers were arranged, lights adjusted, and music softly played from a small speaker, filling the hall with gentle background melodies. She moved through the space with careful attention, adjusting chairs and straightening decorations, making sure that the environment was flawless. Her hands moved with grace and precision, her mind always focused on the details that others overlooked. Despite the busyness, she found little moments to play short notes on the piano whenever she could. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she would play a familiar song, feeling the music flow through her fingers and into her heart. These small interactions with the piano gave her a sense of peace, a private joy in the midst of chaos. It reminded her that even if the world did not recognize her talent, she still possessed it, and it was hers alone to cherish. The wedding guests continued to gather, and the energy in the hall became electric. Conversations buzzed, glasses clinked, and laughter echoed off the walls. The bride and groom appeared, radiating happiness and nervous excitement. The maid kept moving, attending to every small need, keeping the space immaculate. No one gave her more than a passing glance, yet she remained calm and focused, quietly proud of the invisible role she played in making the day perfect. As she walked past the grand piano again, she paused for just a second, letting her fingers brush the keys lightly. She imagined playing for an audience, filling the room with music that would capture everyone's attention. The thought made her heart race, though she quickly pushed it aside. No one expected her to perform. She was just a maid, a silent helper, someone who would vanish after the day was over. And yet, the dream of sharing her music, of surprising people with the depth of her talent, lingered quietly in her mind. Even as the wedding drew closer, she remained dedicated to her work, unseen but essential. The guests continued to mingle, oblivious to the quiet presence moving among them. She smiled softly as she adjusted a tablecloth here and a flower arrangement there, finding satisfaction in the perfection she created. In her own way, she was part of the magic of the day, even if no one realized it. As the first hints of the ceremony approached, she paused near the piano one last time before returning to her duties. Her fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the cool surface and imagining the music she could play. For now, it remained a secret, a hidden part of herself that only she knew. But the possibility lingered, like a quiet note waiting to be played at the right moment, hinting at the surprising turn her day might take. The wedding day carried on with the usual excitement, but as the evening drew near, a sudden problem threatened to disrupt everything. The hired pianist, who was supposed to provide live music during the ceremony and reception, had called at the last minute to cancel. Panic spread among the staff, and the bride's face reflected her worry. Guests were arriving soon, and without music, the hall would feel empty and incomplete. The organizers scrambled, trying to figure out a solution. They whispered among themselves, suggesting alternatives, calling other musicians, but nothing seemed to work. The tension grew with each passing minute. The maid was busy as always, moving quietly through the hall, adjusting table settings and checking decorations. She overheard the staff talking about the missing pianist. For a moment, she stopped, her mind racing. She had played piano for years, in secret, but had never considered performing for such a crowd. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, to let the music flow, but she hesitated. Who would take her seriously? She was just a maid, invisible to everyone around her. One of the senior staff members noticed her pause. They had always known she was talented, though never in a public way. They approached her hesitantly, asking, "Can you play the piano?" The maid hesitated, uncertain if anyone would believe she could perform under pressure. She nodded quietly, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. The staff member smiled, encouraging her. "It's now or never. The guests are arriving and we have no one else. You can do this." The maid felt her heart race. She had dreamed of moments like this but never imagined it would happen at a grand wedding filled with people she did not know. She glanced at the piano in the corner, its polished surface gleaming under the soft lights. The keys seemed to call her name, inviting her to play. She took a deep breath, wiping her hands on her apron before slowly approaching the instrument. The staff watched nervously, unsure if this quiet maid could truly meet the challenge. She seated herself on the bench, adjusting it to the perfect height. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, remembering all the songs she had practiced over the years. She began with a simple scale to warm up, the soft notes floating through the room. At first, the staff exchanged doubtful glances, but as she continued, their skepticism began to fade. There was a confidence in the way her fingers moved, a quiet elegance that suggested years of unseen practice. Meanwhile, guests were beginning to notice the sudden hush in the staff area. Conversations paused, and curious glances were exchanged. The maid's hands moved skillfully across the keys, and soon a gentle melody filled the air. It was soft, delicate, and beautiful, a tune that seemed to match the emotions of the day. The sound drew attention, and slowly, people began to look toward the source. No one expected the maid to be the musician, and surprise crossed many faces when they saw her sitting at the piano. The bride and groom were among the first to notice. Their eyes widened, and a smile of astonishment spread across their faces. They had assumed the day's music would be provided by a professional, and they were not prepared for this unexpected revelation. Yet the melody was perfect, flowing effortlessly, filling the hall with warmth and emotion. The maid played as if the piano had always been an extension of herself, her fingers dancing over the keys with confidence and grace. The guests' initial surprise turned into admiration. Whispers of amazement passed through the crowd, and people began to lean in, listening more intently. Some even held their breath, captivated by the unexpected talent before them. The maid, though nervous at first, found her rhythm and allowed herself to become fully immersed in the music. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling each note resonate through her, connecting her to the room and everyone in it. As she continued, the music grew in richness. She added subtle variations, delicate flourishes, and gentle crescendos that carried the emotions of the day. Guests were enchanted, many wiping away tears or smiling in quiet wonder. The maid had never seen so many people listen so attentively, and the realization that her music could touch others filled her with a mixture of pride and humility. She was still the same person she had always been, working quietly behind the scenes, yet in that moment, she held the attention of everyone in the hall. Staff members watched from the edges, their eyes wide with amazement. Some shook their heads in disbelief, having known her for years but never seen her perform like this. It was as if the maid had stepped out of the background and into a light she had never imagined, revealing a hidden world of talent that had gone unnoticed for too long. The music was no longer just notes on a piano. It was a story, a voice, a revelation. The bride and groom exchanged glances filled with gratitude and admiration. They had no idea the maid possessed such skill, and yet the moment felt perfect, as if it had been meant to happen. The maid's music seemed to mirror the love and joy in the room, filling every corner with beauty and elegance. Even those who had initially doubted her abilities were swept away by the power of her performance. Time seemed to slow as she continued to play, weaving through melodies with ease and emotion. The piano, once just another piece of furniture in the grand hall, became a bridge between her hidden world and the guests' hearts. Every note told a story, expressing feelings she had long kept to herself, emotions that had never been shared. The audience was captivated, unable to look away or turn their attention elsewhere. The maid felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration. Her hands moved automatically, guided by years of practice, but her mind was aware of every eye watching her. The pressure was immense, yet it pushed her to play better, to reach deeper into her talent than she ever had before. She could feel the energy of the room responding to her music, a quiet acknowledgement of her skill and presence. Slowly, the staff began to relax, seeing that the situation was not only under control but becoming extraordinary. Guests whispered their astonishment, some even taking discreet videos on their phones. The maid's performance was no longer just a replacement for the cancelled pianist. It had become a highlight of the wedding, an unexpected moment of beauty that no one would forget. As the first piece came to a gentle end, there was a brief pause in the hall. The maid looked up, her eyes meeting the gaze of the bride and groom, who were smiling with tears in their eyes. The audience clapped softly, almost in disbelief, unsure if they should applaud yet. as if they wanted to savor the moment a little longer. The maid took a small, humble bow, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that she had never experienced before. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just as a maid, but as someone whose talent could inspire and move others. Even after she stepped back from the piano, the room continued to buzz with excitement. Guests talked in hushed tones about the performance, many going out of their way to compliment her, asking how long she had been playing, and expressing their surprise that such talent could remain hidden for so long. The maid returned to her duties, quietly adjusting chairs and ensuring the hall remained perfect, but now with a newfound confidence. She knew that she had shared something extraordinary, and that the perception of her as just a maid had changed, at least in the eyes of those who had witnessed her music. The evening continued, but the energy in the room was transformed. What had started as a crisis turned into an unforgettable experience, and the maid remained at the center of it all, quietly proud of the unexpected opportunity. She realized that sometimes, hidden talents wait for the right moment to shine, and when they do, they can astonish even the most unsuspecting audience. The wedding would be remembered not just for the vows and the celebration, but for the quiet maid whose music captivated everyone, turning an ordinary day into something truly remarkable. The maid returned to her post for a brief moment, but her mind was still on the piano. She could hear the faint hum of conversation from the guests, punctuated by occasional remarks about her performance. Many were still whispering in amazement, replaying the melodies in their minds. She felt a strange mixture of nervousness and pride. Her fingers itched to play again, to continue the story she had begun. The room had already begun to feel different, as if her music had left a lasting impression that could not be erased. Soon another problem arose. The ceremony was about to start, and the traditional music for the bride's entrance was missing. The organizers were panicking once more, unsure how to proceed. The bride looked anxious, her hands ringing slightly as she waited for a signal. Seeing the maid earlier at the piano, one of the staff whispered, "Could she play the entrance music?" The bride, desperate but trusting the instinct of those who had seen her talent, nodded quickly. The maid felt her heart leap. This was her chance, a moment to shine in front of everyone. But the weight of expectation made her hands tremble slightly. She walked slowly toward the grand piano, her uniform rustling softly with each step. Guests had started to take their seats, unaware of what was about to unfold. The maid seated herself, straightened her posture, and let her fingers hover over the keys for a moment. She took a deep breath, allowing the quiet of the hall to settle her nerves. Then gently she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they grew steadily in confidence. The melody was familiar to many, a classical piece known to accompany weddings. Yet her interpretation brought a delicate beauty that was entirely her own. The guests began to notice immediately. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and a hush fell over the hall. The bride's entrance had never felt more magical, and everyone sensed the importance of the moment. The maid played with careful precision, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys. Every note seemed to resonate with the emotions of the day, the joy, the anticipation, the love in the air. As the bride appeared, walking down the aisle with a soft smile, the music seemed to guide her steps. Guests were captivated, many unable to hold back tears, touched by the unexpected harmony of music and ceremony. The maid's confidence grew as she saw the effect her playing had on the audience. She realized that her music could create a connection, something deeper than words or appearances. The hall was silent except for the piano. Each note carried through the air, weaving around the guests and filling the space with elegance and emotion. Some whispered in disbelief, "Is she really a maid?" While others simply shook their heads, amazed at the talent they had overlooked for so long. The maid continued, her hands moving effortlessly, her focus entirely on the music. She had performed for herself many times, but performing for an audience of strangers, and seeing their reactions, was an entirely new experience. As the bride reached the front, the maid's melody shifted slightly, softening to accommodate the ceremony's progression. The guests were fully absorbed, many leaning forward in their seats to catch every note. It was clear that her performance was no longer just background music. It had become a central part of the event, enhancing the emotions and beauty of the day. The maid felt a quiet thrill in this realization, a sense that she was finally seen not for her role as a helper, but for her talent and her heart. When the ceremony concluded and the bride and groom were officially united, a soft murmur of applause spread through the hall. The maid's hands hovered briefly over the keys, acknowledging the unspoken praise. She did not stop, however, letting the music flow into the beginning of the celebration. Guests who had been skeptical at first were now fully engaged, smiling, nodding, and even whispering to each other about the astonishing pianist they had never noticed before. The maid's playing became more expressive as she moved through different pieces, shifting from gentle, romantic tunes to lively melodies that matched the joy of the occasion. Guests began to relax, dance, and enjoy the music, all without realizing how seamlessly she had transformed the atmosphere. Even those who had initially underestimated her began to see her in a new light. It was clear that she was more than just a maid. She was a musician, a storyteller through sound, capable of captivating an entire room with her talent. Meanwhile, the staff observed with amazement. They had always known she was capable, but watching her command the attention of hundreds of people was extraordinary. Some exchanged proud glances, silently congratulating each other for recognizing her skill. The maid, though focused on the piano, felt their quiet support, which strengthened her confidence further. Every note she played became bolder, more expressive, and more connected to the emotions of the crowd. As the evening progressed, the maid transitioned seamlessly between pieces. She added subtle flourishes, intricate chords, and soft, lingering notes that drew the guests in even more. The music became a conversation, speaking to the joy, love, and celebration in the room. People who had arrived expecting a typical wedding found themselves completely enchanted. Conversations had stopped entirely, replaced by admiration and awe. The maid's performance had turned a moment of uncertainty into something unforgettable. Her hands moved with both skill and passion, a combination that revealed her years of dedication and love for music. She remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, the empty rooms where she poured her heart into every melody. Now, that private world had opened up to hundreds of people, and the response was more than she could have imagined. The realization that her talent could move others brought a warmth to her chest, a sense of belonging she had never felt before. Even the bride and groom could not hide their astonishment. They had trusted the maid on a whim, never imagining the magic she would bring to the day. They exchanged glances filled with gratitude and wonder, feeling incredibly fortunate to witness this unexpected performance. The maid's music had become a centerpiece of the wedding, a thread weaving through every emotion and interaction, elevating the day in a way no one could have predicted. Guests began to take subtle photos and videos, capturing the moment for memories, but most were too captivated to move. They whispered to each other, remarking on her skill, the beauty of the melodies, and the fact that they had assumed she was just another staff member. It was a quiet lesson in humility and surprise, a reminder that talent and worth often lie beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. As the evening continued, the maid's performance did not waver. She had found a rhythm, a natural flow, and every piece she played resonated with the mood of the crowd. Her music transformed the hall, filling it with elegance, emotion, and an energy that was both gentle and powerful. Guests felt as if they were part of something rare, an experience they would remember for the rest of their lives. The maid had stepped out of the background and into the hearts of everyone present. The staff, observing from the sidelines, quietly celebrated her achievement. They had always known her potential, but seeing it fully realized was extraordinary. They knew that after this day, she would no longer be viewed merely as a maid. She had proven her worth in a way that could not be ignored. Even the most skeptical guests could not deny the impact she had made with her music. Finally, as the performance neared a natural pause, the maid allowed the last notes to linger in the air. She sat back, taking a moment to breathe, and looked around the hall. Guests were clapping softly, many with tears in their eyes, others smiling broadly, all filled with a sense of wonder. The bride and groom approached, their gratitude evident in their expressions. The maid felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her hidden talent had finally found the stage it deserved. As she returned to her duties, adjusting chairs and checking tables, she carried with her a newfound confidence. The day had started like any other, with her in the background, unnoticed and underestimated. But now, she had touched the lives of everyone present, leaving a lasting impression through her music. She realized that talent, patience, and quiet dedication could lead to extraordinary moments, and that sometimes, the most unexpected people could create the most unforgettable experiences. The music continued to fill the hall, and the maid felt herself completely absorbed in the performance. Her hands moved with effortless skill, gliding over the keys in a way that seemed almost natural, as if the piano were an extension of herself. Every note she played resonated with the emotions in the room, echoing the joy, the love, and the excitement that filled the air. Guests were no longer whispering or quietly observing. They were completely entranced, leaning forward in their seats, unable to look away. Some guests had tears in their eyes, moved by the delicate beauty of the melodies. Others smiled broadly, their faces lighting up with awe and admiration. Even those who had been skeptical or indifferent at first were now captivated. The maid's music had transformed the atmosphere, creating a sense of magic that seemed to lift everyone's spirits. People began to forget the mundane worries of the day and simply immerse themselves in the sound. It was as if time had slowed, allowing the music to take over completely. The bride and groom watched in amazement, holding hands tightly as they took in the unexpected spectacle. They had never imagined that the quiet maid they had overlooked could produce such profound music. Every note seemed to mirror their own emotions, and they felt as if the performance had been written just for them. The bride's eyes glistened, and the groom's expression softened, both lost in the beauty and elegance of the moment. The maid's music had become the heart of the wedding, transforming it from a simple ceremony into an unforgettable experience. The staff watched from the sidelines, a mixture of pride and astonishment on their faces. They had known her talent in private, but seeing it displayed for hundreds of people was a revelation. Some whispered to each other, unable to believe what they were witnessing. They saw the joy in the guests' faces and realized that this simple, quiet maid had turned a potential disaster into a highlight that would be remembered for years. They exchanged proud smiles, knowing that her dedication and love for music had finally been recognized. The maid played with growing confidence, allowing herself to express emotions she had long kept hidden. Each piece became more intricate, with subtle variations and gentle flourishes that drew the audience in even more. She felt a connection with the guests, sensing their reactions and letting them guide her performance. Her music spoke to them, telling stories without words, sharing feelings that could not be expressed otherwise. The room was completely captivated, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her gift was touching so many lives. Children, usually restless at events like this, were also mesmerized. Some sat quietly at their parents' feet, watching her fingers move across the keys with fascination. Others hummed along softly, caught up in the rhythm and melody. Even those who did not understand the complexities of the music could feel its beauty and the passion behind it. The maid's performance had created a universal language that spoke to everyone, regardless of age or background. As the evening progressed, she shifted seamlessly between pieces, moving from soft, delicate tunes to lively, energetic melodies. Each song carried a different emotion, capturing the full range of the day's feelings. Guests were entranced, some tapping their feet lightly, others closing their eyes to fully experience the music. The atmosphere was alive with a sense of wonder and admiration, a rare moment where everyone was united by the beauty of a single performance. The maid's focus never wavered. She had learned to perform in private, but performing for an audience was different. She felt the weight of their attention, but instead of fear, it gave her strength. Her hands moved more freely, her expressions more genuine, and her connection to the piano deeper than ever before. She realized that she was not just playing notes. She was sharing a part of herself, revealing her heart and soul through every key she pressed. The audience could feel it, and their astonishment was a testament to the depth of her talent. Guests began to murmur among themselves, commenting on how surprising it was that someone they had assumed to be just a maid could possess such skill. Many reflected on how easily people underestimate others based on appearances. The maid, unaware of these conversations, continued to play, focused entirely on the music. She did not need recognition to know the value of her talent, but seeing the reactions of those around her was undeniably rewarding. It reinforced the idea that true skill and dedication cannot remain hidden forever. The bride and groom, along with a few close family members, approached the piano quietly, watching in awe. They did not interrupt the performance, understanding that this was a rare and delicate moment. Their expressions were filled with gratitude and amazement, recognizing that the maid had elevated their wedding beyond anything they could have imagined. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging how fortunate they were to witness such an extraordinary display of talent. As the music reached its crescendo, the maid's fingers flew across the keys with precision and grace. The sound filled every corner of the hall, weaving through the guests and lifting their spirits. Some clapped along softly to the rhythm, others simply listened, completely absorbed. The performance had become a living, breathing part of the celebration, a shared experience that would be remembered long after the wedding ended. It was a moment of pure connection, where music bridged the gap between social roles, status, and expectation. Finally, as the last notes lingered in the air, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if the audience collectively held its breath. Then, the room erupted in applause. Guests rose from their seats, clapping and cheering, their faces alight with admiration. Some called out words of praise, while others approached quietly to offer thanks and congratulations. The maid, still seated at the piano, felt a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had done more than play music. She had transformed the room and touched the hearts of everyone present. The bride and groom were among the first to reach her, expressing their heartfelt gratitude. They thanked her repeatedly, insisting that she had made their day unforgettable. The maid smiled softly, her usual humility intact, but she felt a warmth that she had never known. She realized that her life could change from this moment, that people could see beyond her role as a maid and appreciate the depth of her talent and character. It was a revelation, a moment of recognition she had long dreamed of, but never expected to experience so fully. Staff members approached one by one, offering congratulations and praise. Some were surprised at how naturally she had handled the pressure, while others marveled at her ability to captivate a room. Even the guests who had initially underestimated her were now her admirers, unable to deny the impact she had made. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and the acknowledgement of her skill was overwhelming in the most wonderful way. The maid finally stood, closing the piano lid gently. She allowed herself a deep breath, savoring the moment and the joy she had created. She had been seen, truly seen, for her abilities and her heart. The applause continued, and the energy in the room remained high, filled with excitement and admiration. For once, she felt like she was not just part of the background, but a central figure in something beautiful and meaningful. As the evening moved forward, the wedding took on a new energy. The music continued, now lighter and more playful, but the memory of her extraordinary performance lingered. Guests would talk about it, sharing stories of the quiet maid who had astonished everyone with her piano. The maid returned to her duties, but there was a noticeable change in the way people looked at her. She moved with the same grace and care, but now with a quiet confidence, knowing that she had left an indelible mark on the hearts of those present. The maid reflected on the day, realizing that talent and dedication cannot stay hidden forever. Sometimes, it takes a moment of opportunity, courage, and trust for the world to recognize what has been quietly nurtured. She understood that her music had given her more than applause. It had given her acknowledgement, respect, and a sense of belonging. The wedding had become more than a celebration of love. It had become a celebration of her hidden brilliance finally coming to light. And as she looked around at the smiling faces and the joy in the hall, she knew that this was only the beginning of what she could achieve. As the applause finally began to fade, the maid closed the piano lid gently, taking a moment to let the music linger in the air. The room was filled with a warm, almost tangible energy, a mix of admiration, awe, and joy. Guests turned toward her, many approaching with smiles, words of praise, and astonishment. No one could believe that someone they had assumed to be just a maid could possess such remarkable talent. The maid felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a quiet pride that was entirely new to her. The bride and groom approached first, their expressions glowing with gratitude. They clasped her hands warmly, thanking her over and over for making their day so extraordinary. They said things they would never forget, words of appreciation that carried weight far beyond ordinary politeness. The maid smiled, feeling shy yet elated, understanding that she had changed the entire atmosphere of the wedding and left a lasting impression on everyone present. Other guests, who had previously overlooked her, were now eager to speak to her. They complimented her skill, marveled at her poise, and asked how long she had been practicing. Many confessed that they had underestimated her simply because of her role at the wedding. Some even shared that the performance had moved them emotionally, made them think about the hidden talents that might exist in the people around them. The maid listened quietly, her heart swelling, realizing how deeply her music had touched others. The staff, too, approached, some with wide smiles and pride shining in their eyes. They had always known of her talent, but seeing it acknowledged in such a public, unforgettable way brought them immense joy. They praised her for remaining calm under pressure, for seizing the moment when it mattered most. The maid acknowledged their words with gentle nods, feeling both grateful and validated. She realized that her quiet dedication over the years had finally been recognized, not just by her colleagues but by everyone in the room. For the first time in her life, she experienced the profound effect of her abilities being celebrated openly. She had spent years in the background, unnoticed, playing in empty rooms where the only audience had been herself. Her music had always been a personal joy, but now it had become a shared experience, one that brought people together and created unforgettable memories. She felt a warmth in her chest that was far stronger than any applause, a sense of belonging that went beyond recognition. As the wedding continued, the energy in the hall was electric. Guests carried a newfound respect for her, and many lingered near the piano, hoping for a few more notes, a few more glimpses of her talent. The maid, while remaining humble, indulged them for a short while, letting her fingers dance lightly over the keys, creating soft melodies that blended beautifully with the celebration. People were enchanted, smiling, laughing softly, and even wiping away happy tears. The music had become a bridge, connecting everyone in the room through a shared experience of awe and delight. The bride and groom, meanwhile, made sure she felt included in the festivities. They invited her to join the celebratory dance later, a gesture of appreciation that touched her deeply. For the first time, she realized that her presence, her talents, and her contributions mattered in a way that went far beyond her previous understanding. She had moved from being invisible to being central, and the recognition she received was sincere and heartfelt. Some guests approached her with questions about her musical journey, fascinated by how someone with such skill had gone unnoticed for so long. She shared small pieces of her story quietly, explaining that she had always loved the piano and practiced whenever she could, often in secret. Her story resonated with them, and many nodded in understanding, admiring her dedication and resilience. They commented on how easily talent could remain hidden in plain sight and how important it was to look beyond appearances. The maid began to feel a shift within herself as well. Confidence that had been dormant for years started to grow. She realized that she could embrace opportunities she might once have feared or doubted. The applause and admiration were not just external validation. They were a reflection of the value of her hard work and passion. In that moment, she understood that recognition was not about being noticed superficially but about letting her true abilities shine when the moment was right. Throughout the evening, she continued to play intermittently, filling quiet moments with gentle, captivating music. The hall remained alive with laughter, dance, and joy, but now her music threaded through every part of the celebration, enhancing the beauty of the day. Guests often turned toward the piano, drawn by the melodies that seemed to rise effortlessly from her fingers. Each note was a reminder that talent and dedication could create magic, even in the most unexpected of people. The staff and guests alike began to treat her differently, not just with newfound respect but with genuine warmth and kindness. Conversations that had once ignored her presence now included her voice. People asked for her thoughts, opinions, and guidance, recognizing that she was more than her role as a maid. She responded with humility, smiling quietly, but inside she felt a growing pride. For the first time, she realized she could belong to a world that had previously seemed unreachable, a world where her contributions mattered and her voice was heard. By the time the evening was winding down, the maid was approached by several guests who expressed a desire to hear more of her music in the future. Some invited her to play at private gatherings or community events, while others simply wanted to stay in touch, inspired by her story. She listened carefully, feeling a mixture of surprise and gratitude. It was an unexpected development, one that promised opportunities she had never considered. The seeds of recognition had been planted, and she could feel them beginning to grow. The bride and groom made a point of thanking her again before the night ended, assuring her that she had made their wedding truly unforgettable. They praised her for stepping up when needed, for bringing joy and beauty into the room, and for surprising everyone with a hidden talent that transformed the day. The maid felt a warm, deep satisfaction. She had always loved playing music, but now she knew it could touch others in profound ways. She understood that her gift was not just a private joy but something that could inspire, delight, and move those around her. As the guests slowly began to leave, the maid reflected on the day. She thought about how she had once been just a background presence, moving quietly through rooms and tasks without recognition. Yet through her music, she had claimed a space in people's hearts, shown the depth of her dedication, and revealed a talent that had long gone unnoticed. She realized that her life could change in ways she had never imagined, that moments of courage and skill could open doors that had once seemed closed. The staff quietly gathered around her, praising her once more. They spoke of her composure under pressure, her talent, and the joy she had brought to the wedding. The maid felt a profound sense of gratitude, both for their support and for the opportunity she had been given. She realized that the quiet patience and persistence she had cultivated over the years had led to this extraordinary moment. She had waited, practiced, and hoped, and now it had finally come to fruition. The maid packed up her belongings quietly as the hall emptied, but she carried with her a new sense of purpose. She understood that recognition was not a fleeting moment but a door to future possibilities. She had been seen, truly seen, for her skill, dedication, and heart. The applause, the admiration, and the gratitude she had received would stay with her forever, reminding her that talent and passion could not remain hidden indefinitely. In the days that followed, her story spread among friends, family, and the local community. People talked about the maid who astonished an entire wedding with her piano, marveling at her skill and humility. She received invitations to play at other events, not as a maid, but as a recognized musician. It was a transformation she had never anticipated, a reminder that even those in the background can emerge into the spotlight when opportunity meets preparation. The maid looked back on the wedding with a sense of wonder and gratitude. She had entered the hall as an overlooked staff member and left having touched the hearts of hundreds of people. Her music had created connection, joy, and lasting memories. She understood that talent, perseverance, and quiet courage could break through invisibility, changing not just her life but the perception of those around her. And as she thought about the future, she knew that this was only the beginning, that her music would continue to open doors and inspire others in ways she had never imagined.